Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Good evening and welcome to the public meeting for the Boeing Corrective Measures Study for the Surficial Media Operable Unit, or SMOU, and DTSC SMOU Statement of Basis Proposed Remedy for the Santa Susana Field Laboratory, or SSFL. I'm Dr. Jamie Slaughter, the Public Participation Manager for SSFL at DTSC, and I'll be facilitating tonight's meeting. This meeting is being recorded. We ask that you please be respectful and courteous to all participants. During the public comment period, please keep your remarks clear, concise, and within the 2-minute time limit. There will be an opportunity to provide verbal comments for the record with a court reporter present. We appreciate your participation and are committed to making this a productive and inclusive meeting. DTSC's mission is to protect California's people, communities, and environment from toxic substances, to enhance economic vitality by restoring contaminated land, and to compel manufacturers to make safer consumer products. DTSC respectfully acknowledges that we conduct our work on the unceded indigenous lands of over 200 distinct Native tribes within the state of California. DTSC recognizes all California Native American tribes, regardless of federal recognition. We honor the indigenous communities who have stewarded this land for generations, and we recognize their enduring relationship with the land, waters, plants, and animals that are integral to their culture and heritage. In acknowledgement of these tribes, we strive to approach our work here with respect for the historical and cultural significance of this area. Here is a brief overview of tonight's meeting. First, we will have opening remarks by Than Berg, Site Mitigation and Restoration Deputy Director, followed by an SSFL overview by Bill Martinez, Site Mitigation and Restoration Program Engineering Geologist, followed by the technical presentation for the Boeing RCRA Corrective Measures Study Report, Surficial Media Operable Unit, and DTSC SMOU Statement of Basis Proposed Remedy by Julie Lincoln, DTSC Project Manager, overseeing Boeing areas of responsibility and a Senior Hazardous Substances Engineer with the Site Mitigation and Restoration Program. Then we will take public comments for the record, followed by how to ask DTSC staff questions, additional ways to submit public comments, and provide next steps. A few reminders before we move forward. Please speak clearly and at an even pace during the public comment portion of the meeting. Comments during the public comment segment are limited to 2 minutes. There will be a visible 2-minute timer, and you will hear a tone when your time is up. I will review additional ways to share your input at the end of the meeting. DTSC will not respond to comments tonight. Instead, all comments will be addressed in a response to comments document, which will be released with the final decision before cleanup begins. Now, I would like to introduce our Deputy Director for the Site Mitigation and Restoration Program at DTSC for opening remarks, Than Berg. Than?
Thank you, Dr. Slaughter. Thank you, everyone, for joining tonight and prioritizing this site cleanup, especially during your evening hours. I know everyone's personal and family time is very precious, so thank you for being here. We're here today to talk to you about Boeing's Soil Corrective Measures Study and DTSC's Draft Statement of Basis. In 2022, Boeing signed a settlement agreement with DTSC with the goal of expediting cleanup of contaminated soils and groundwater with no reduction of environmental protection in the Boeing area of responsibility. Boeing is preparing a separate corrective measures study to address groundwater, and DTSC plans to prepare and release the draft statement of basis for groundwater, i.e., this will be the groundwater cleanup decision document, for public comment in winter 2026. The final statement of basis for soils will be the DTSC decision document that identifies the cleanup plan and the requirements that Boeing must meet under the terms of the 2022 settlement agreement. It includes cleanup of soils covering 78 acres by excavation and disposal, cleanup of soil vapor, covering 31 acres, and cleanup of off-site soil located in the Sage Ranch State Park, covering approximately 2 acres. This proposed remedy provides for protection of human health and the environment while also preserving cultural and biological resources. The DTSC draft statement of basis is not a final document. We want to hear feedback and welcome your comments. You can present those comments tonight verbally, but you could also present them through our website or even through snail mail. There'll be more information later in the presentation on how you can do that. Now I'm going to turn the presentation over to the real experts on the site, starting with Bill Martinez, an engineering geologist working on the site. So with that, Bill.
Thank you, Tham, and good evening, everyone. The Santa Susana Field Laboratory is an inactive former aerospace and energy research facility that overlooks Simi Valley in Ventura County and is located approximately 29 miles northwest of downtown Los Angeles. The SSFL site encompasses 2,850 acres of very rugged terrain with an elevation change of roughly 1,100 feet. The site was historically used for rocket engine and nuclear energy testing from 1948 to 2006. The site is divided into 4 distinct administrative areas, designated as areas 1, 2, 3, and 4, with areas of undeveloped land to the north and south that were not used for site operations. Boeing owns approximately 2,400 acres of the SSFL property, including the undeveloped northern and southern areas. The map on the right highlights Boeing's areas of soil responsibility in red, which are the focus of tonight's discussion. Currently, there are no active industrial operations at the SSFL. Boeing maintains limited staff and contractors on site to support closure and remediation efforts, with temporary office trailers located throughout the property. Next slide, please. The cleanup is regulated under the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, or RCRA. The RCRA corrective action process includes site investigation, risk assessment, evaluating cleanup alternatives, and selecting a remedy. DTSC oversees this process, ensuring that cleanup protects both human health and the environment. Next slide, please. Now, before we move on, it's important to define some key terms and acronyms that'll be used on tonight's presentation slides. We've already mentioned RCRA in the previous slide, and now we'll go through the rest. First, we have Corrective Measure Study Report, which is CMS. Next, there's the Surficial Media Operable Unit, which will be SMOU. The DTSC SMOU Statement of Basis Proposed Remedy, which you will see as Statement of Basis or Draft Statement of Basis. Below ground surface is BG, below ground is BG, and below ground surface is BGS, and refers to structures below the ground surface or the geology underneath the site. And finally, we have the RCRA Facility Investigation, which you will see as RFI. Next slide, please. This slide provides a brief overview of how to ask questions and submit public comments to DTSC. Even though we'll open the floor for public comments later tonight, we also want to ensure that you know how to follow up after tonight's meeting ends. Jamie will go over all the details before we close, but here's a quick overview. Cleanup of soil, groundwater, and related media at the SSFL is regulated by DTSC in accordance with RCRA guidelines. The public's encouraged to review the complete SSFL project administrative record, including investigation reports for the preliminary Boeing CMS areas, the Boeing SMOU CMS report, and other documents, including data and quality assurance information evaluated by DTSC to inform the basis for this DTSC proposed SMOU decision. If you have clarifying questions about the CMS or the statement of basis, soil or soil vapor areas of responsibility, If you have clarifying questions about the CMS or statement of basis documents, you can submit them through DTSC's online stream portal. Questions submitted via stream will not be part of the official public comment period. However, to submit formal public comments, you can use several options, including submitting them via online at the Smart Comment application, which is accessible from the DTSC public comment period information page, submitting them via email at DTSC_SSFL public comments, all one word, at dtsc.ca.gov or by mail. Details for all of these will be shared again before we wrap up. Whether you comment during the designated public comment segment tonight or after the meeting using one of the methods described above, we welcome your input and questions to help inform the final decision. Next slide, please. And now we will transition to tonight's presentation. I would like to introduce Julie Lincoln, the DTSC project manager for the Boeing areas of responsibility at SSFL and a senior hazardous substances engineer with DTSC's Site Mitigation and Restoration Program. Julie will be presenting the Boeing Draft RCRA Corrective Measures Study Report for the SMOU and the DTSC Draft SMOU Statement of Basis Proposed Remedy. For corrective action, the 2007 consent order identifies 2 operable units, including the SMOU and the Chatsworth Formation Operable Unit, or CFOU, for RCRA facility investigation purposes. Tonight's presentation focuses on the SMOU, which is comprised of saturated and unsaturated soil, sediment, surface water, air, biota, and weathered bedrock. And with that, I'll hand it over to you, Julie. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. DTSC proposes cleaning up soil covering approximately 78 acres to depths up to 10 feet below ground surface, and soil vapor covering approximately 31 acres to depths up to 20 feet below ground surface. This cleanup applies to areas 1, 3, and subarea 10. DTSC also proposes removal of soil covering approximately 2 acres to depths up to 6 feet below ground surface at Sage Ranch Park, located along the northern boundary of SSFL. The total overall acreage included in the analysis without overlap is approximately 113 acres. Excavation and/or soil vapor extraction will cover approximately 94 acres. These areas are shown in pink. No excavation or soil vapor extraction will occur in approximately 19 acres to allow for protection of cultural and biological resources. These areas are shown in blue. This proposed cleanup balances soil and soil vapor cleanup for protection of human health and ecological receptors, with leaving some impacted soil and soil vapor in place for protection of significant cultural and biological resources. Cleanup is primarily focused in areas of operation, with a few exceptions allowed in these areas for protection of cultural and biological resources. Later in the presentation, we will talk about how cultural and biological exceptions were applied at the Canyon RFI site circled in yellow on this slide. In the next slide, we will show a short video that highlights some of the significant biological resources that will be protected with this proposed cleanup. This only highlights a few of the biological resources that will be protected and does not cover cultural resources to protect the location of these resources. We are currently showing the Canyon RFI site area. Santa Susana tar plant is protected under the California Endangered Species Act. There will be tar plant that has to be removed under a permit with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife at several RFI sites at SSFL as part of DTSC's proposed cleanup. However, because Canyon is a site where tar plant is widespread and thriving, and the site is interior to SSFL, DTSC, through consultation with California Department of Fish and Wildlife and the United States Fish and Wildlife Service, which I will refer to as the wildlife agencies, proposes to allow many exceptions for tar plant in this area. There are other resources that will also be protected here, but the most widespread resource at this site is tar plant. Cleanup will occur across most of CTL3. However, there's a small oak grove in the northwestern portion of CTL3 where DTSC, through consultation with the wildlife agencies, proposes to allow some impacted soils to remain for protection of this resource. Oak trees are protected by the Ventura County Tree Protection Ordinance and were also requested for protection by the United States Fish and Wildlife Service. Subarea 10 is another area where DTSC, through consultation with the wildlife agencies and the tribes, has chosen to allow exceptions for protection of biological resources. This is a large area of undisturbed natural habitat that will remain mostly intact to allow for protection of biological resources. By leaving this area mostly intact, DTSC hopes this area can serve as a haven for large mammals that may be displaced through the cleanup at other RFI sites. STL4 is a site where significant cleanup will occur. However, there is a raptor's nest, moss gardens, and other resources not shown here that will require protection through the cleanup. This may involve working outside the nesting season or working while the nest is not occupied. Protection of the moss gardens may involve making sure the bedrock is not disturbed in this area and that care is taken to ensure soil and dust do not impact the area. We talked about what DTSC is proposing for the cleanup at SSFL. Now we will talk about how we got here. The SSFL cleanup has evolved over the course of several regulatory milestones. Specifically, the 2007 consent order established the corrective action framework. Then in 2022, DTSC and Boeing executed a settlement agreement that amends the 2007 consent order with respect to Boeing only. The 2022 settlement agreement established protocols requiring Boeing and DTSC to follow the US EPA RCRA Facility Investigation Remedy Selection Track, or RCRA First, to advance cleanup remedy determinations. RCRA First was developed by the US EPA to accelerate cleanup efforts at hazardous waste sites by improving the efficiency of site investigation and remedy selection for the protection of human health and the environment. This approach expedites cleanup determinations with no reduction in environmental protection requirements. SSFL has been extensively studied for over 2 decades. More than 25,000 samples were collected and used to prepare human health and ecological risk assessments for each RFI site. These risk assessments help determine which areas require cleanup. Technical and economic feasibility studies were prepared to identify additional areas for cleanup to protect groundwater. The investigation, risk assessments, and feasibility study reports provide a comprehensive understanding of contamination and its potential impact in the Boeing areas of responsibility. These documents supported the development of the corrective measures to remediate contamination for protection of human health, ecological receptors, and groundwater resources. Boeing prepared a corrective measures study to evaluate remediation methods for the Surficial Media Operable Unit as outlined in the 2007 consent order and 2022 settlement agreement with DTSC. It focuses on remediation of soil and soil vapor. DTSC evaluated the information in the corrective measure study and prepared a draft statement of basis to propose a remedy and gather public input. In accordance with the RCRA First process, Boeing and DTSC identified corrective action objectives to protect human health and ecological receptors for hypothetical future property use scenarios, including off-site and on-site recreator workers. This receptor category is defined as cleanup that meets the standard for people to recreate and/or work in the area, like current site workers, trespassers, and hypothetical future recreators or workers. The resident no garden, which means cleanup that meets a standard for people to live on site. The resident with garden, which means cleanup that meets a standard for people to live on site and consume homegrown produce from a backyard garden. And ecological, like aquatic invertebrates, fish, amphibians, terrestrial plants, soil invertebrates, and species such as the deer mouse, hermit thrush, and great blue herring, among others. Media cleanup standards were developed using risk-based screening levels for chemicals, background values for radionuclides, or the lowest method detection limit, whichever is most protective. Our goal is to reduce risk and protect people and the environment now and in the future. Boeing and DTSC have identified corrective actions to protect human health and the environment while considering potential future of the area, including recreation and work, living on the site, and protections for plants and animals. Boeing proposed CMS areas based on areas that needed cleanup to protect humans, plants, and animals, to address radionuclides above background, and to protect groundwater. They also included the 5 post-closure permitted areas as CMS areas. These CMS areas were refined to overlap and to exclude NASA areas or critical infrastructure such as roads, existing buildings, or utilities. Some areas were proposed for exception, and this will be discussed further in a few slides. Although Area 1 burn pit has undergone significant removal as part of the imminent and substantial endangerment order, the Surficial Media Operable Unit, CMS, and Statement of Basis do not consider any of those actions and show all of the CMS areas as still needing to be cleaned up. Additionally, Boeing evaluated some groundwater CMS areas further in the corrective measure study. Next, we will talk about how Boeing further refined the risk evaluation where CMS areas overlapped with cultural and biological resources. However, first, we want to talk a bit about what the risk assessment numbers mean. For cancer, the risk management range extends from 1 × 10⁻⁶, or 1 in 1 million, to 1 × 10⁻⁴, or 1 in 10,000. Action must be taken if the risk exceeds 1 × 10⁻⁴. No further action is needed if the cancer risk is less than or equal to 1 × 10⁻⁶. Human health screening levels are based on a risk of 1 × 10⁻⁶ for carcinogens. This means that if 1 million people were exposed to the chemical at the screening level concentration, there is a probability that 1 of those people may develop cancer as a result. The non-cancer risk or hazard is used in both human health, non-cancer, and ecological risk. Note that a hazard quotient is the hazard associated with a single chemical. A hazard index is the cumulative hazard for all chemicals in a sample. A hazard less than or equal to 1 means there is no adverse non-cancer health risk for human health and no risk to ecological receptors. A hazard greater than 1 means concentrations are present above established human health or eco-safe levels. Screening levels for chemicals with non-cancer adverse health impacts are based on a hazard of 1. Boeing consulted with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife and the United States Fish and Wildlife Service and tribal consultants of the SSFL Sacred Sites Council to identify potential cultural and biological resource exception areas. Boeing conducted leave-in-place residual risk evaluations to evaluate the level of risk to human and ecological receptors if contaminants are left in place. For sites that exceeded a human health risk threshold criteria of 1 × 10⁻⁴ for cancer for human health and a hazard of 1 for non-cancer for both human health and ecological receptors, Boeing conducted a detailed evaluation considering the magnitude of residual risk, the significance of the resource, and other factors. Boeing provided recommendations for each potential exception area in Appendix D3 of the corrective measure study, for DTSC's consideration. Before moving into a specific site to review CMS areas for remediation and exception, here's a quick overview of the site. For those of you that have visited the site, the SSFL front gate is located in the upper right-hand corner at the corner of Facility Road and Woolsey Canyon Road, which is shown here in red. Boeing areas of responsibility include areas 1, 3, and sub-area 10. Tonight, as an example, we'll talk specifically about the Canyon RFI site located in Area 1. First, we will talk about cultural and biological exceptions proposed by Boeing in Appendix D3 of the CMS. Then we will talk about how DTSC evaluated these areas and what DTSC proposes for remediation. Before we discuss the specific information for Canyon, we want to walk you through what you will see in the next several slides. We are using figure 19 from the statement of basis in this example. However, this should also help when looking at other figures as well. These figures are complex and share a lot of information, so we want to build this example layer by layer to help you understand the content presented. Here we see the site with no visible layers. Next, we are going to see the blue, biological, and cultural areas of significance. As you can see, these cover most of the canyon area. These purple shapes are the resident with garden CMS areas. The brown shapes are the resident no garden ecological CMS areas. The red shapes are the soil removal areas for protection of groundwater. The green shapes are the large home range CMS areas. And the blue dots are the target soil sample locations. Now we will see each of these items we just discussed come in and build the complete figure. We will see this figure again in a few slides. Let's talk about what we see on this slide. This is figure 8.1 in Appendix D3 of the CMS report. The blue shading shows a combined layer for cultural and biological resources. Note that in this figure, most of the area shown has cultural and biological resources. The brown shading shows soil CMS areas for a residential, no garden, eco cleanup. The orange shading shows soil vapor CMS areas for a resident, no garden, eco cleanup. The yellow dots show soil vapor sample locations, and the blue dots show soil sample locations. For sites that exceed the risk threshold criteria, Boeing identified soil and soil vapor locations within the cultural and biological leave-in-place areas that could be removed to reduce risk below the threshold criteria. This is referred to as target remediation. For Canyon, there are 15 soil sample locations, the blue dots, and 2 soil vapor locations, the yellow dots, that exceed the threshold criteria. This slide shows the soil CMS areas Boeing proposes for cleanup at Canyon. This is figure 8.2 from Appendix D3 of the CMS report. Soil vapor locations will be shown on the next slide. Again, all the areas shown in blue shading are areas with cultural and biological resources. The purple areas are corrective action areas for a resident with garden cleanup. The brown areas are for a resident no garden eco cleanup. The red areas are soil removal areas for protection of groundwater, and the green area is a large home range ecological receptor cleanup. Any single hatching in these areas is proposed as leave-in-place, while double-hatched areas with blue dots are proposed for targeted cleanup by Boeing. The open or non-hatched areas do not contain any exceptions, and the entire area will be remediated. However, you can see there are 10 soil CMS areas located within cultural, or biological resource areas where Boeing proposes targeted cleanup. The proposed areas are all brown CMS areas, which are for the resident no garden eco scenario, because that is a scenario where the threshold criteria apply. All the purple areas that overlap the cultural and biological resources are shown as leave-in-place areas. Additionally, most of the groundwater protection areas were proposed to be left in place by Boeing. This slide shows the soil vapor CMS area Boeing proposes for cleanup at Canyon. This is figure 8.3 in Appendix D3 of the CMS report. The areas shown in blue shading are areas with cultural and biological resources. The orange area shows the soil vapor cleanup area, which is single hatched in the CMS, meaning it was proposed to be left in place. The pink outline shows the estimated area of impact in the bedrock vadose zone. This slide shows soil CMS areas DTSC proposes for cleanup at Canyon. This is figure 19 in the draft statement of basis. The soil vapor locations will be shown in the next slide. Again, all the areas shown in blue shading are the areas with cultural and biological resources. The purple areas are corrective action areas for a resident with garden cleanup. The brown areas are a resident no garden eco cleanup. The red areas are soil removal areas for protection of groundwater, and the green area is a large home range ecological receptor cleanup. Any single hatching in these on-site areas is proposed as leave in place, while open areas and double hatched areas are proposed for cleanup by DTSC. The open areas would be cleaned up fully, where targeted remediation is proposed to occur in the double hatched areas. If DTSC proposes targeted cleanup, then cleanup would only occur at the soil sample locations identified on the figure. If an on-site area was proposed for targeted cleanup by Boeing, but DTSC proposes a full cleanup, then the entire area would be remediated, not just the target sample locations. This slide shows the soil vapor CMS areas DTSC proposes for cleanup at Canyon. This is figure 20 in the statement of basis. The areas shown in blue shading are the areas with cultural and biological resources. The orange area shows the soil vapor cleanup area, with the open area proposed for soil vapor extraction by DTSC. The pink outline shows the estimated area of impact in the bedrock vadose zone. Based on the information DTSC received in the CMS report and from meetings with the wildlife agencies and tribal consultants, DTSC weighed the benefit of protecting cultural and biological resources against potential risks to human health and the environment pursuant to applicable laws. DTSC then reviewed all proposed exception areas with the Los Angeles Regional Water Quality Control Board to ensure groundwater resources were appropriately protected. DTSC's proposed decision for each CMS area, including CMS areas containing cultural and biological resources, is presented in Table 5 and Figures 5 through 59 of the draft statement of basis. DTSC is using EPA's RCRA first approach to streamline remedy selection. Excavation and soil vapor extraction are the approved technologies. Land use controls and long-term monitoring will be used in areas where cleanup isn't feasible. These methods were selected based on their effectiveness, sustainability, and compliance with waste regulations. Boeing evaluated 2 cleanup alternatives. Alternative 1 only uses land use controls and monitoring. Alternative 2 includes excavation, soil vapor extraction, land use controls, and monitoring. DTSC evaluated both alternatives based on effectiveness, feasibility, cost, sustainability, and state acceptance. Alternative 2 with modifications is the preferred remedy because it meets the cleanup goals across most of the site. The next few slides cover important implementation factors. Some CMS areas may have cross-contamination from NASA areas. DTSC evaluated all CMS areas the same way, even those Boeing identified in the CMS as being within the NASA remediation areas or extended remediation areas. An example of how these areas are identified is shown here. We are showing a small portion of figure 18.3 from Appendix D3 of the CMS. In the northern portion of the Silvernail RFI site, which is located in Area 3. This site shares a border with Area 2. The white hatching shows the NASA remediation areas or extended remediation areas and covers almost all of Areas 2 and 3 in this graphic as outlined in red. A large portion of a soil vapor CMS area is located within this area. All CMS areas identified for cleanup by DTSC must be addressed. Boeing and NASA will need to work out who addresses remediation in these areas. The DTSC post-closure permit addresses 5 surface impoundment units located in Boeing Areas 1 and 3. The proposed remedy included in the statement of basis for the 5 surface impoundments is to remove the existing caps, for example, the engineered covers, and excavate the underlying soil to bedrock. Under the draft post-closure permit, DTSC is proposing that the 5 surface impoundments be remediated consistent with the remedy proposed in the statement of basis. These 2 documents have been released concurrently for public comment. DTSC and Boeing continue to evaluate soil vapor cleanup needs. Certain roads or infrastructure may delay cleanup in those areas due to the need to maintain the roads or infrastructure. However, when repairs or infrastructure are removed or replaced, the appropriate cleanup would need to take place at that time. Soil will be tested for PFAS during confirmation sampling. If additional work is needed related to PFAS, Boeing will address it at that time. Backfill sources are being evaluated to ensure clean soils are used for backfill. DTSC anticipates the backfill study will be completed later this year. These items will be further defined in the corrective measures implementation plan. DTSC is proposing alternative 2 with modifications. This includes excavation covering approximately 80 acres from the surface to depths up to 10 feet below ground surface, and soil vapor extraction covering approximately 31 acres to depths up to 20 feet below ground surface. This alternative includes no excavation or soil vapor extraction at approximately 19 acres for protection of cultural and biological resources. This proposed remedy provides for protection of human health and the environment while also preserving cultural and biological resources. Land use controls and long-term monitoring will be initiated in areas where chemical concentrations remain above target cleanup levels and where the removal of soil or soil vapor is not feasible. DTSC proposes Boeing's alternative 2 with the following additional requirements. Refinement of Boeing's proposed remedy in areas containing cultural and biological resources. Additional soil excavation for protection of groundwater. Evaluation of confirmation samples for PFAS in CMS areas. This alternative is expected to meet the corrective action standards across most of the site. It will also provide a high degree of long-term effectiveness and reliability. It will be readily implementable and protective of the community, workers, and the environment during implementation. And it provides protection for cultural and biological resources. The draft statement of basis for the project is consistent with the scope of the analysis performed in the 2023 SSFL Program Environmental Impact Report. After tonight's meeting and the close of public comment, DTSC will review all input and may revise the draft statement of basis and/or require Boeing to revise the SMOU CMS report. Once finalized, we'll approve the documents and file a CEQA notice of determination. This is anticipated to occur in the winter 2026. Boeing will prepare and DTSC will review a Boeing Surficial Media Operable Unit Corrective Measures Implementation Plan, including a Corrective Measures Design document. The Corrective Measures Design document is a detailed plan outlining the specific steps, procedures, and technical specifications needed to implement the corrective action for cleanup at SSFL. We anticipate DTSC will approve the CMI plan in the summer 2026, and cleanup will begin shortly after. DTSC will issue a work notice before remediation starts. DTSC will also send out community updates throughout the process. Now I will hand it back over to Jamie to begin taking public comment for the record.
Thank you, Julie. Before we begin the public comment portion, please remember to be respectful and speak clearly. Comments are limited to 2 minutes. This meeting is being recorded and your verbal comments will be included in the official public record. Additionally, options for submitting comments will be shared shortly. We want your voice to be heard in the way that works best for you. We will now begin the public comment session for the record. Today's date is October 7th, and the time is now 6:43 p.m. Please focus your remarks on the CMS and statement of basis documents or tonight's presentation. If you have clarifying questions before submitting a comment, you can send those to us via stream. We will review how to use that shortly. You may also comment verbally tonight or submit comments via mail, email, or online via smart comment, accessible via the link or QR code on the screen. All input will be addressed in DTSC's formal response to comments document that will be published with the final decision. If you need help submitting your comment, please let us know and we will assist you. To participate, if you've joined on your computer, please click the raise hand button. If you've joined on your phone, please press *9 to raise or lower your hand and *6 to mute or unmute yourself. When called on, please unmute, state your comment, and stay within the 2-minute limit. You will hear a tone when your 2 minutes is complete. Okay, we're going to get started in just a moment. Bill, who is our first person with raised hands?
We have Teresa Mahoney.
Okay, thank you. Teresa, can you please unmute yourself? And give me a second to bring the timer back, and then we'll go ahead and take your comments. Okay, Teresa, are you ready? Teresa Mahoney, can you please unmute yourself and provide your public comment, please? Teresa, can you hear us?
Okay. Are you there?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes. I would like to say that I attended a naturalist course at the Santa Susana Field Lab in 2023. As a citizen, I was under the assumption that the 2007 court ruling had already been adhered to, that Boeing had already cleaned up the contamination. And your representative, Kendra Sims, was there. When I asked her about the contamination, including the radioactive material, her response was, "Don't listen to those people, none of that is true." To my surprise, none of the cleanup had been done by Boeing at that time. I no longer attended those meetings, but I did have health issues after that time. So this area cannot be used as a recreational area or even as habitat because it's not safe. It's contaminated with not only radioactive material, but forever chemicals that are seeping into the groundwater and contaminating the aquifers and getting into the Simi Valley water supply. So I just am surprised that 18 years after the initial ruling, this has still not been addressed. And by lowering the cleanup standards, you're not doing anybody any favors. You are creating a health hazard. This is an imminent threat to the public and the animals and the plants on the site. It needs to be completely cleaned up to background levels like the 2007 court ruling said it would.
Thank you, Teresa. Bill, who is our next person?
Next up, we have Hayden Galvin.
Hayden, can you please unmute yourself? Hayden? Hayden Galvin?
And to unmute, just press *9. Sorry, *6.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead, you can provide your comment.
Okay, great. So the so-called corrective measures study being presented today is a sham. The cleanup proposed by Boeing and apparently waved through without concern by DTSC will leave the great majority of pollution at the field lab not cleaned up. Boeing signed its cleanup agreement in 2007 and was supposed to be finished with cleanup by 2017. Instead, in 2022, Boeing worked out a secret backroom deal with DTSC, severely breaching the cleanup agreement and setting the stage for the false cleanup we're being presented today. What DTSC and Boeing don't want you to know is that they're planning to leave vastly more pollution on site than previously agreed. In some cases, it's hundreds to thousands of times more pollution. What they're calling a resident with garden cleanup is not a true resident with garden standard. Boeing and DTSC created this fake resident with garden standard we're hearing about today by fiddling with obscure risk model inputs so that they can pretend it's a strong cleanup while actually weakening cleanup levels to such an extreme degree that Boeing will be allowed to leave the vast majority of its land seriously polluted. Large swaths of poisoned land in the exception areas, some 10% of Boeing's cleanup areas, are slated to receive no cleanup whatsoever, cynically exploiting people's goodwill with the false excuse that sensitive species and cultural artifacts are better protected by leaving the site polluted rather than cleaned up. Today is a tragic day as we witness DTSC ready the final seal of approval for Boeing's abandonment of its SSFL cleanup, condemning the communities around the field lab to bear the toxic burden of Boeing's waste in perpetuity.
Thank you, Hayden. Bill, who is our next person?
And next, we have Cameron Kuda.
Cameron, can you please unmute yourself? Cameron? Can you hear us?
Hi, can you hear me? Sorry, there's a bit of a
Yes.
delay when you ask to unmute.
Okay, I can hear you. Go ahead and start.
Great. So before the 2022 background deal worked out between Boeing and DTSC, Boeing cleanup was going to be a resident with garden cleanup standard, a full cleanup leaving the site so clean you could live there and eat food from your garden. Now, Boeing's soil cleanup plan is drastically weaker, cleaning soil to quote unquote up to resident with garden level, in reality using a far weaker resident no garden cleanup standard for nearly half of the CMS areas. Yet even the resident with garden standard in Boeing's new cleanup plan is a sham. It's not the true resident with garden cleanup level. It's a misnomer, false advertising, like opening a box of cereal to find you've got dog food instead. The fake resident with garden standard they're telling you about today is based on unscientific manipulations on the risk model. For instance, assuming your daily veggie intake consists of half a baby carrot. These changes produce so-called resident with garden cleanup levels that will allow way more contamination and sometimes hundreds to thousands more to remain on-site not cleaned up. Worse, these weakened cleanup levels do not even apply to most of the site. Where they do, they only apply to the top 2 feet of soil, even though the roots of produce penetrate far deeper than 2 feet. And even with the much weakened resident with garden standard that Boeing is using, the post-cleanup risks are astonishing. For the Happy Valley North site, 9 in every 1,000 people will get cancer. For the Environmental Effects Lab site, 1 in every 100 people will get cancer. And for the Advanced Propulsion Test Facility site, 3 in every 100 people will get cancer. Again, those are the post-cleanup risks for the pollution Boeing proposes to leave in place. These risks go far beyond EPA's acceptable risk range. In reality, the post-cleanup.
Thank you, Cameron. If you feel like you still have more of a public comment to make, you can go ahead and either go back in line, or you can send the rest of your comment or your full comment to us via email or stream. Thank you. Bill, who do we have next?
And next we have William Preston Bowling.
William, can you please unmute yourself and go ahead and provide your comment?
Hi, my name is William Preston Bowling, and I'd like to direct attention to the Cannon Tree area, the TRE, where I think that the cultural and the biological should be separated, because I recognize the First Nations and all of the artifacts and what they've done up on the site, and they've used it for years before the Santa Susana Field Lab has been developed. But when the TRE was demolished, Boeing hydroseeded the area with the Santa Susana tar plant seed. So I guess in hopes to not clean up the area and call it biological. So I wanted to make that a point. And also, if you could go back on Google Earth Maps and find out the areas that were developed and re-evaluate those areas and clean it up to a background standard to protect everyone below the site. Thank you very much.
Thank you, William. Bill, who do we have next?
We have Melissa Bumstead.
Melissa, could you please unmute yourself?
My apologies. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. I'm going to actually open my comment up for 1 second for everyone in this room to say hi.
Hi, everyone.
Because the DTSC wasn't able to host a public session, we went ahead and rented our own facility, and we are gathered here actually to mourn the death of a meaningful cleanup at the Santa Susana Field Lab. We had a funeral. We recognized that the way that the CMS has been manipulating the cleanup standards, that the residential with garden standard no longer exists in the way that the original cleanup agreements intended to protect human health. It's shameful that DTSC refuses to acknowledge the most basic physical realities of erosion, wind, or even gravity in its assessments. And I'm specifically mentioning right now the Generalized Human Health Risk Assessment Conceptual Site Model, figure 2.2a on PDF page 114, where Boeing completely has ignored any potential for offsite contamination. And I would like to remind the DTSC that it is unacceptable to not consider basic science, such as, like I mentioned, erosion and gravity and its risk to the community, and the way that contamination does migrate offsite. We know that because of federally funded studies. We know that because of peer-reviewed studies, and we know that because of sister agency data that DTSC refuses to integrate into its decision-making process and instead relies solely on Boeing's paid-for science. This is unacceptable.
Thank you, Melissa.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't think I'm done with my comment time yet. I've got 22 seconds. The settlement agreement changed the SRAM. It is significantly less health protective. We would like to go back to the 2014 SRAM that actually makes the residential with garden cleanup meaningful again. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Bill, who do we have next?
And now we have Bonnie Lavin Hughes.
Bonnie, can you please unmute yourself? Bonnie, can you hear us?
Are you able to take Bonnie from my laptop? She's right here.
No, we have to do it in the order that her hand's raised. We have her logged in. Can she unmute the device that we have on our screen?
She's trying right now. She's standing right next to me. Again, I don't understand.
I think I get it. You have to mute one of the devices.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I think I was echoing. Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I tried to write down.
We just need whoever's in that room with you, we need everyone else on mute, or I'm gonna have to mute you. So if everyone else
I
that's
probably won't use all my 2 minutes anyway, because I don't have all of the wonderful facts, figures, and ways to talk about this that some of my community members here have done. But I feel pretty bamboozled by the presentation that I've seen tonight. It's kind of clear to me that most of the effort and funds are being spent on the graphics and the text and the, entities that are presenting over and over all of this information. I'm not sure why DTSC thinks they're serving me or the community with all of this, because most of this is just mundanity, data, and things that are being said over and over that just don't amount to much. And what I've heard from the rebuttals has made me pretty discouraged. And I know we've been fighting an awful long time. And I look at that purple area, the most meaningful thing on all of those graphics, and it just gets smaller and smaller and shrinks and shrinks. And as a person who lives in the buffer zone of the field lab, it's terrifying and frustrating. And we really need you to honor the commitment and push back against Boeing and get them to do what they've agreed to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. Bill, who do we have next?
And next we have Lauren Hammersley.
Lauren, can you please unmute yourself?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Just making sure. Can you still hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead.
I can't hear anything, so I'm not sure. Can they hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I just would like to say I really appreciate everybody's public comments so far. You've gotten all the information from my fellow community members that you need to hear on why we disagree with the CMS and why we disagree with your presentation today. But really what I would like to share is my story, because that's why this matters. It's not just my story, it's the story of so many members of our community. My daughter Hazel was diagnosed with a very aggressive form of cancer at the age of 2 in 2013. She fought on and off for 5 years, and she passed away at the age of just 7. She endured a ton of different types of treatment, harsh treatments like chemotherapy, radiation, an 8-hour tumor resection surgery, stem cell treatment, immunotherapy, clinical trials, you name it. And my daughter's not the only one that has gone through this, and my family is not the only family who has lost somebody. Additionally, in 2022, my oldest son was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. We have no history of type 1 diabetes in our family, and type 1 diabetes is a disease that's linked to contamination to this site. Simi Valley is our home, and it needs to be protected. This is not acceptable, and families should not live what we have lived through. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lauren. Bill, who do we have next?
And next we have Alex Dodd.
Alex, can you please unmute yourself?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Boeing's 2007 consent order set a deadline for cleanup to be complete by 2017. Boeing should have removed its contamination from the site 8 years ago, and we could have all moved on with our lives instead of having another evening wasted by DTSC and Boeing. Instead, here we are once again. Why is Boeing so far past its deadline for its cleanup? It's because Boeing spent the intervening years refusing to begin cleaning up its portion of the site, instead negotiating behind closed doors with DTSC to weaken the cleanup. California regulators repeated publicly that they would hold Boeing accountable to the 2007 consent order, with then Cal EPA Secretary Blumenfeld saying that, quote, "Those are legally binding agreements. We will hold them to those agreements. Our job is to regulate, not to negotiate." Despite those claims, regulators did in fact enter into backroom negotiations with Boeing, arriving at a severely weakened cleanup agreement with no public comment or environmental review. That agreement allowed Boeing to leave huge amounts of pollution on the site, primarily by weakening the great majority of Boeing's cleanup levels. Those greatly weakened cleanup levels were then used to decide what parts of the site would get any cleanup at all, the CMS areas. In the guidelines for selecting what polluted soil would be included in the resident with garden CMS areas are multipliers that severely restrict the amount of soil to be included. So not only will Boeing be using cleanup levels that are enormously weakened, but even worse, only soil with contamination that exceeds 5 times the weakened resident with garden risk-based screening level will be included in a CMS area. Thus, Boeing's soil cleanup will only skim off a little bit of the very highest concentrations of contamination, leaving the great majority of it not cleaned up, including the 235 soil samples with concentrations above their garden risk-based screening levels. The multiplier provision is yet another manipulation by Boeing and DTSC.
Thank you, Alex. Alex, if you feel like you still need to submit your public comment, you can do that via mail or email or smart comment, and we will share those ways in a moment. Thank you, Alex. Bill, who do we have next?
Next, we have Anoushka Raj.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'm speaking tonight on behalf of Tri-Valley Cares, and I'm really disappointed with what is happening with the Santa Susana Field Lab cleanup. People in this community have been our allies and have been fighting for a long time to make sure that contamination is actually cleaned up. We were promised a full cleanup that would protect people and the environment, and both of these priorities are clearly not priorities anymore. It feels like past promises are being broken. DTSC's new plan seems to let Boeing avoid doing the full cleanup in any capacity. With the presentation today, it also seemed like we are relying on numbers and paperwork to make things look safer than they actually are. Contamination does not stay put. There are fires, the wind blows, it rains, and it spreads, it gets into external air, water, soil. The site has already caused so much harm that so many people talked about today. Families next to it have rare cancers and illnesses that they should not have to face. Parents have lost children, people have lost trust in the government. It's just really heartbreaking to see DTSC go along with this plan after everything that the community has been through. And I want DTSC to kind of take from this meeting and remember who this cleanup is really for. It's for the families and for children and for people who live in the area. It's not about saving money for Boeing or just rushing to close a file. Clearly, DTSC's priority does not seem to be to keep people safe. People should not be worried about what is in the ground around them. And most importantly, I think we need to discuss how Boeing can afford to do this right. The least they can do is clean up their own mess, and DTSC.
Thank you, Anushka. Bill, who do we have next?
And next up, we have Hakan Williams.
Hakan, can you unmute yourself, please?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Well, folks, this is it. Pretty remarkable to hear the Berg at the beginning here claimed that the settlement agreement DTSC entered with Boeing in 2022 would result in supposedly, quote, no reduction in environmental protection in the Boeing area. It's hard to imagine how that could possibly be true when that 2022 agreement greatly weakened cleanup levels for the great majority of all the pollutants that Boeing needs to clean up. And here we are presented with a soil CMS that implements those near non-existent cleanup levels. DTSC is proposing to leave pollution not cleaned up because there are some oak trees or tar plant. The tar plant has been shown to be easily reintroduced from a seed bank, especially in disturbed soil like you would have after a cleanup. And besides, I think those plants would be a lot happier if they were growing in non-poisoned soil. Folks, the very fact that they're telling you they'll be leaving a lot of contaminated soil in place, that phrase should be a red flag. I hope it's crystal clear to people from the figures they show just how little cleanup is planned to take place. This is one of the most contaminated sites in the whole state, and they're proposing a few piddly spots of so-called targeted cleanup. These folks from DTSC are supposedly public servants, supposed to protect us, the public, from Boeing's contamination. Well, DTSC, we see where you've thrown your lot. You're working to protect Boeing from the public. I'm hopping mad. This is our future, DTSC. This is our family's health. And I'm deeply sad. This is a tragic night, truly the final nail in the coffin of the community's hope for the removal of Boeing's toxins from our backyard. Our prayer for the healing of the Santa Susana Field Lab. It's not too late to reverse course. Please do the right thing, DTSC. The future's watching.
Thank you, Hakan, for your comment. Bill, who do we have next?
And next up, we have Ruth Lavanos.
You said Ruth?
Yes, Ruth Lavanos.
Ruth, can you please unmute yourself?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I wanted to make sure there was no feedback. My name is Ruth Luavanos. You have heard me many times. I'm a former Simi Valley City Council member, a teacher, a mother, and most importantly, a cancer survivor. Unfortunately, I cannot say that for over 100 children who have died since the contamination at Santa Susana Field Lab. The number of lies you've told tonight, too many to count, as my middle school students would say, stop the cap. Okay? DTSC's goals are to protect public health and the environment from toxic substances by regulating hazardous waste and cleaning up contaminated sites. So I want to ask, since when does DTSC, Boeing, or the Department of Energy care about cultural artifacts? Did they care when the Fernandeño tribal leader Rudy Ortega Sr. came to Rocketdyne in 1971? No, they didn't care then. You don't care now. These are excuses. Okay, we had a legally binding agreement in 2007, and then in 2022, DTSC decided to negotiate with the polluters. Well, let me tell you, I'm a law school graduate. My husband's an attorney. You don't negotiate unless there's something that someone is getting. So what is DTSC getting? What are you getting from Boeing? What are you getting from DOE? What are you getting from them? Because you don't negotiate a legally binding agreement unless they have something on you. Okay, we are literally, we still have pets that are dying. We have children that are dying, adults that are dying. Boeing brought in $66 million last year. They have the money, but we don't. Simi Valley residents don't have the money. I don't have money to pay for cancer treatments, radiation treatments, funerals, dental issues, tumors, allergies, Hashimoto's disease, asthma, and more, and on and on and on. Every time it's windy here, which by the way, Simi Valley is very windy, okay? Every time I worry about whether or not the cancer is going to come back, whether it's going to kill me, whether it's going to kill my daughter, my husband, or my mother-in-law, my dog, my neighbors, my friends. I am tired of burying family members and friends. So do your job and protect public health. That is your job.
Thank you, Ruth, for your comment. Bill, who do we have next, please?
And next up, we have Charisse Petker.
Charisse, please unmute yourself and provide your comment.
Hi, my name is Charisse Petker. Just a little emotional still from hearing Ruth and all the other commenters. I'd like to let you know that my family and I, we had PFAS exposure when I was quite young. And I worked at finding a technology that can remediate it. And I've been testing it in a very high pollution zone as well. I also do not feel well. We have high rates of cancer here. It's well known. And I hope that all of our efforts by our family are going to be able to help more people mitigate cancer and remediate PFAS, the really toxic forms and that, and you all are welcome to go check out circularsolar.net. You're going to see a lot of field test work that other people haven't done. And I too have lost people. And I just wanted everyone to know there's people trying to work on this and help other people as well, especially children, because it's unfair. And I just wanted everyone to know you can go check out the website and you'll see pollution before and afters. And I just wanted to say so sorry to all the commenters that have lost people and can't afford cancer treatment. I understand, and there's people looking out for you, okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sharice, for your comment. Bill, who do we have next?
We have Denise Duffield.
Denise, please unmute yourself and you can go ahead and provide your comment.
My name is Denise Duffield. I'm the Associate Director of Physicians for Social Responsibility, Los Angeles. Our organization has worked for the full cleanup of all nuclear and chemical contamination from SSFL since we were founded over 45 years ago. As a physicians organization, our concern is harm to nearby communities from exposure to the contamination. Numerous studies, including those conducted by DTSC, show that contamination has and does migrate from the site. It's on a hill. There's a thing called gravity that brings it down. And of course, migration also happens during wind, rain, or fire events. So it's just surreal to see the denial of off-site contamination. And SSFL is not just a little contaminated, it's grossly contaminated with substances, hazardous substances from decades of spills, releases, accidents, and terrible to non-existent environmental practices. That is why we have fought for a full cleanup. We know what these contaminants do to people. We know what gets off-site. We have built enduring relationships with the community, workers who've been harmed. We met mothers and children with rare illnesses such as retinoblastoma who met in Children's Hospital, sued Boeing and won only years later to meet another group of mothers who live near the site whose children had rare cancers who are not settling Melissa and Parents versus SSFL. But again, DTSC has failed its duty to protect the public, human beings, people, not plants, though biological exemptions have been conveniently exploited to get out of a real cleanup. This meeting also, by the way, should be in person, not online. You ought to be able to face the community and have real conversations. But on some level, we know this is all for show. You take our comments because you're required to. We told you in 2022 that changing the standardized risk assessment methodology would exponentially weaken the cleanup. But that's what's now in this corrective measure study, and which also, by the way, won't take children into consideration. Very little contamination will get cleaned up under this manipulated standards. Please use the 2014 SRAM. Stop protecting Boeing's bottom line and giving it everything it wants and start protecting communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. Bill, who do we have next?
And next we have Jenny Knack.
Jenny, please unmute yourself and you can go ahead with your comment, please. Jenny?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I can't hear you, but I think I can hear myself over the speaker. I have to say I've heard DTSC stay in public meetings time and time again. Your toxicology specialist, Dr. Hanley, has reassured people that contamination doesn't come off site. Dr. Becker, Stephen Becker, has promised people contamination isn't coming off site. And if it doesn't come in amounts that would hurt people. But I have to say it was an absolute shock to see it in print. It was horrific to see a graph that showed no pathway for offsite migration, when you know very well it does get offsite. That, coupled with the gutting of the residential with garden standard, is a death sentence for us, and you know it. And when I saw it and realized that we aren't getting a cleanup and you don't want to be held accountable or liable for what is going to continue to happen, Simi Valley is named after the winds. It is on a hill. We all know that there's no walls. The stuff is not in barrels. It's not contained. When I look at your maps, it's kind of a joke. I thought that a risk-based cleanup was going to be dependent on how the land was going to be used. You have this conservation easement, the land is supposed to be protected. We all know that that can be overturned by future generations at the county level. But when you have a map with eco levels of cleanup next to resident with garden, next to exception levels, it's a mess. There's no rhyme or reason for it, but we know that we're getting screwed. We can see the bubbles, and we know that even the best that you can do, the residential with garden, we know that that isn't even what it is anymore. That's closer to the old 2014 recreator standard. You are getting away.
Thank you, Jenny. Jenny, please, if you feel like you still have comments that we have not heard, please send those to us. Bill, who do we have next?
And next, we'll hear from Julie Korenstein.
Julie, can you please unmute yourself?
Yes. Can you hear me now? You
Yes.
can hear me? Yeah,
Mhm.
okay. I have spoken numerous times, but I feel to no avail. I'm very worried because I don't really understand how much contaminated soil, water vapors will remain after the cleanup. I'm concerned about where the contaminated soil will be going to. I'm still not clear at all, or what the route of the trucks will be, especially on the 118 that I take every day. I see trucks from time to time, and I try not to drive near them because I'm not sure if they're contaminated. It's hard to understand how the areas that are considered protected that will not be cleaned up, what contaminants remain there? And will those contaminants migrate to other areas? I don't understand why an area is protected if it's contaminated. I just, it puzzles me. I can't figure that one out. And I have been hearing that Boeing will leave 90% of the soil not cleaned up. I've been writing notes, and it says something about 94 acres cleaned up, 19, I think, are the protected ones. I thought the site was over 2,000 acres. I'm a layperson. I'm not a scientist, and I just don't understand it. The whole discussion about garden and residential versus gardens or not, are people moving into the area once a developer builds a home be told, do not plant any vegetables because you will kill your family? I don't understand it. My granddaughter and her husband and my great-grandson live a few miles away from the Santa Susana Field Lab. I live absolutely in fear every day. Please, you need to protect us and protect the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Julie, for your comment. Bill, who do we have next, please?
And we have Laura Hayter.
Laura, can you please unmute yourself and provide your comment?
Hello, this is Laura Rosenberger Hyder, President and Fracking, and I'm very concerned about the radioactive isotopes. The recommendations of biological exceptions include exceptions like thorium-230 and some other radionuclides. I'm still reading the table, and also lead. I'm concerned with lead. There were lead in some of these soil samples, and all right. Well, I think you should do a better job cleaning it up, and stick to the 2007 agreement. And certain people need to have gardens. The food shortages. Trees' roots grow deeper than 2 feet. And well, my comment is you should clean up all the areas to garden standards as agreed upon in 2017 and do not weaken the standards. And I'm looking at some of the chemicals that were happened to my list. Some of these scary name chemicals I haven't seen much before that probably didn't have that many studies on. A whole list of chemicals present. And it's not just the PFAS. Oh, where am I? Oh, like perchlorate, acrochlor, TCDD, oro. Well, thorium-229 is radioactive, and lead exceedance, cadmium and cyanides and mercury, those things and lead, they can blow around in the dust. I'm concerned about that. All right. I'm going to give some more comments on the health impacts. I know even the strontium, well, I don't know, was that there? All right, I'll give some more comments later. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Laura, for your comment. Bill, who do we have next, please?
And now we have Steve Andrews.
Steve, can you please unmute yourself and provide your comment?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'd like you to, just for a moment in your mind, put your mentally put your arms around your loved ones, and think what would be the worst thing that could happen. What would be the worst news that you would get? In 2014, one evening, very pleasant evening, a phone rang, and it was my daughter. She said, "Daddy, your granddaughter is in an ambulance. They're transferring her from UCLA to Children's, and she's got a rare children's cancer, and they don't know if she's going to make it tonight." It's like, what do you do with a call like that? And I said, well, and so since 2014, we've been fighting this, and she's in remission at the moment, but it's on the doorstep every time you turn around. Everyone knows that radiation causes cancer. And I mean, everywhere you go, you walk into a business, there's a sign that says, California tells you that, there's cancer causing materials in this store or whatever. Well, my gosh, how much cancer causing chemicals are there on that hill? And you don't want to clean them up. You want to put a Band-Aid on it. And in the meantime, children are suffering. Families are getting horrible phone calls and then have horrible experiences with their children and their families, and it doesn't go away. It just keeps coming and it stays there. It's not something you just get rid of overnight. Please clean this up and start working for the people rather than the corporations.
Thank you, Steve, for your comment. Bill, who do we have next, please?
We have Rebecca Bertram.
Rebecca, can you please unmute yourself and provide your comment?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Bertram, and I received that phone call. Today would have been 4 years that I lost my husband. I'm sorry. Anniversaries are hard. Oof. We lost him to 2 glioblastomas in 2 months' time, in the best shape of his life. He did treks. He was doing 15,000 steps a day, training to do another trek on Iceland when he started to trip and fall. He first came to me with symptoms on our anniversary, 28 years with 3 beautiful children. He went to UCLA that Monday. He went for further testing on Wednesday. On Thursday, we received the call that they had a diagnosis. It was nothing that we thought it could be. Every test that he had proved how healthy he was. And We miss them every day. Not a moment goes by. I feel that we represent this decade. The Woolsey fire started in 2018. I had to rack my brain. I'm like, what did he do different? He went to get his car at his office. He worked for Amgen for 18 years. And then at the time he was working at a startup biotech company, both cancer research companies. And they were still building the office. It was Atara Bio. They were building the office. So his office was on Agora Road. When I pulled up,
Rebecca, thank you for your comment. If you still feel that you need to provide additional comment, you can send that to us and we'll go through the ways that you could do that in a moment. Bill, who do we have next, please?
Next, we have Kai Mu.
Kai, can you please unmute yourself and provide your comment?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, this is Kirsten. I am a mother of 15 months old. I was just in the room with everybody. Hello. I wanted to share my experience. My husband and I were looking for new homes in Los Angeles. We live in the city. We're looking for a new place to live and came across the beautiful Simi Valley. But we can't move there. It is so dangerous. We learned about these poor people's stories of cancer, and it's something I just can't subject to the risk for my poor child and my future children too. And it comments specifically to the plan. You know, you're in place to address the concerns that people are raising here, but it's not going far enough for future generations. It simply isn't. And I think specifically with the plan, what's most concerning are the protected areas where you're not digging deep enough because you're afraid of the impacts to the groundwater if you dig deeper. I think that's a huge red flag for me, because if you're cautious about digging deeper for causing more damage, then I think that's the big concern. And if this has been dragging on long enough, you say you're going to be putting monitoring in place to just in case, to keep an eye on things. What faith do we have that you're going to respond quick enough if something does come to the forefront in those tests? I work for a major energy corporation. I've been part of these DTSC meetings before. In some of my work, I'm privy to the background of what's possible here, and this simply just doesn't go far enough. I know you can do more. It's a lot of work, but there's so little that we can control in this world. But this just seems like such an easy win for Boeing to make right for the community. So please do what's right and revisit these plans, but don't delay any further than you have. It's really, really critical to this community, and hopefully I'll be able to reconsider my move one day. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment. Bill, who do we have next, please?
And next we have Christina Walsh.
Christina, can you please unmute yourself and provide your comment?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
I have been to more of these meetings than I can count, but I have to say that this is not a proper process using Zoom with no people. The first meeting I went to was in Simi Valley at the Grand Vista Hotel, where the presenters had their backs to us. I would say that this is worse so many years later. I think it's extremely disappointing that you're not even going to come up with a statement of basis for the groundwater for another year. All the while people continue to get sick. You know this. And we went to years and years of presentations where you all were telling us that there wasn't enough fill soil in the entire state of California to manage this cleanup. And now you're telling us about 78 acres. So it is no surprise that I, like everyone else who has spoken here, are just feeling completely betrayed by the state of California. We thought that California would be the strong side of things in this cleanup with the federal entities, and we're seeing that that was never true. This is incredibly disappointing. I just literally cannot believe how we have been lied to and betrayed for so many years and then shown this. What was the purpose even of all those group meetings for decades? It seemed like indeed it was a show.
Thank you, Christina, for your comment. Bill, who do we have next, please?
Next, we have Pamela Carlisle.
Pamela, can you please unmute yourself and provide your
Yeah.
comment? We have 30 minutes left in this meeting. If
I
anyone else
wanted to
has
say that I live in the cul-de-sac in West Hills off of Roscoe between Fallbrook and Woodlake Avenue. My cul-de-sac was built in 1962. My next door neighbor who has lived there for the last 30 years told me that many of the original owners have died of cancer. I would have to assume that many of these original owners actually worked at the SSFL. That's why they were living there, because it's very close. I, in 2022, was diagnosed with kidney cancer. Kidney cancer does not run in my family. Where did that come from? My neighbors across the street both died of cancer. He had prostate cancer. She had ovarian cancer. Her sister, who lived in Calabasas, died of ovarian cancer. I have another neighbor that's on her second round of breast cancer, and another neighbor that has breast cancer. You need to tell me where all these cancers are coming from. This is not a coincidence. This has got to be due to the SSFL, and you cannot put all this information out and tell us that you're not going to do something about this. You need to do something about this, because I'm terrified that my cancer is going to come back. I'm terrified that the rest of my family will wind up having cancer. Do something about it today, not 10 years from now, but today. Thank you.
Thank you, Pamela, for your comment. Bill, who do we have next, please?
We have Amy Marshall.
Amy, can you please unmute yourself and provide your comment?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. It would be an injustice to only look at the research from scientists backed by Boeing who have a motive to help the corporation they work for, rather than the scientists working for nonprofits with their motive only being to help protect the community. We are wise enough to see greenwashing, and we understand the negative effects to our community and our ecosystem that will result from this partial cleanup. Therefore, I implore you to reconsider a full cleanup so our community can finally sleep peacefully, knowing that our water and our air and soil is safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amy, for your comment. We have just under 30 minutes left in this meeting. If anyone would like to provide public comment, you can go ahead and raise your hand. Bill, who do we have next, please?
We have Michelle Marshall.
Michelle, can you please unmute yourself and provide your comment?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Michelle, and I just want to say it's shameful that Boeing is exploiting so-called biological and cultural exemptions to evade responsibility for cleaning up. Lessening cleanup standards to protect endangered plants and animals on site doesn't make any sense, as these are likely already contaminated by the contaminants in SSFL. For example, with the protections of the oak trees on the SSFL site, this isn't a question of tearing out an oak tree to build an office building or a freeway. It's removing an oak that's likely already contaminated in order to do a better cleanup meant to save human lives. Laws made to protect nature were never meant to be used if they endanger humans, animals, and local ecosystems. These biological and cultural exemptions only provide the opportunity for contaminants to continue to affect our community into the future. It does not protect endangered species, animals, plants, lands, or humans. We've had over 700,000 people sign a petition for a proper cleanup. And today we're pleading with you to adhere to the higher standards of the previous agreement made in 2014. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle, for your comment. Bill, who do we have next, please?
We have Nicole Adler.
Nicole, please unmute yourself and provide your comment. Nicole,
can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Hi, I am here to express my disappointment in the DTSC for the lack of regulation. The only level of cleanup that the residents who live below the site will accept is a background level cleanup. And I feel like I need to say that again because I think you guys aren't hearing us or aren't getting it or something. The only level of cleanup that the residents who live below the site will accept is a background level cleanup. The only level of cleanup that the residents will accept is a background level of cleanup. And notice I said below because it's on a freaking hill. It's on a hill. And I would like to see the obvious issue of gravity and migration off the site to be addressed in the future. And if this residential with garden cleanup is the end result, would you let your kids play on this land? Would you let your friends and family live on this land? The DTSC won't even hold in-person meetings in our community anymore. Is it because you guys are tired of looking us in the eyes as we beg for you to do your job and protect us? Is it because you're tired of seeing grieving families telling you about their dead children? Well, I am too. And that is why you need to do your job and protect us from toxic substances. Otherwise, our community members will continue to die for generations from this contamination because of the lack of regulation from the DTSC. The only level of cleanup that the residents who live below the site will accept is a background level cleanup. The only level of cleanup that the residents who live below the site will accept is a background level cleanup. The only level of cleanup that the residents who live below the site will accept is a background level cleanup. The only level of cleanup that the residents who live below the site.
Thank you, Nicole, for providing your comment. Bill, who do we have next, please?
We don't appear to have any other raised hands. So if you haven't gone yet and you would like to make a comment now, please raise your hand and you'll be allowed to do so. I still don't see anyone else popping up in the queue.
We'll just give it just a moment in case anyone is gathering their thoughts. We thank you so far for giving the comments that you have provided. If anyone has any public comment to provide, please go ahead and raise your hand. If you've joined via your computer, and if you have joined via your phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand.
I did see a hand pop up for a moment, but it appears to be retracted. If you did have a comment and you feel that your hand was lowered, please raise it again. Give me one moment. I'm seeing no, it happened again.
Yeah, I saw it too. If you would like to make a comment and you've joined via your phone, please press *9. And if you're on your computer, you can raise your hand using your menu bar at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And it's currently 7:39 p.m. We'll just give another moment or so. If we don't have any further public comments, we'll go ahead and close the meeting, but we're going to give you a chance.
We do have one more from Alex Dodd.
Alex, go ahead and unmute yourself and you can provide your comment, please. Alex, can you please unmute yourself?
Yeah, I didn't have my hand raised, so I'm not sure how that happened, but thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, I apologize for that. I do see another raised hand, and that is Lauren Hammersley.
Okay, I just have one more thing to say. This entire meeting, you did not hear one public comment in support of this measure. You have only heard comment after comment after comment from members of the community, from people who live here, not from Boeing, not from NASA, not from the DTSC. You are hearing from the community themselves, and every single one of us does not support this. We have been saying it for years and will continue to say it. Please do your job and listen to us. Nobody said they supported this. Please do your job.
Thank you, Lauren. Does anyone else have a comment that they would like to make? If so, go ahead and please raise your hand. I don't see any hands raised. If we don't have any further comment, we'll go ahead and close the meeting. Last call, if anyone would like to make a public comment, please raise your hand. We do have someone, Bill. Who is that?
Hakan Williams popped up. So
Okay.
Hakan, please go ahead.
Hi, thanks for taking my comment again. We've heard a lot of powerful comments. I just wanted to add a few more technical points here. We heard a lot from the DTSC presentation about exception areas. One of the major ways the SSFL cleanup was weakened in Boeing's 2022 deal with DTSC was this framework for the so-called exceptions. These are areas where Boeing could get a pass from doing any cleanup whatsoever based on the false excuse that sensitive biological and cultural resources are better protected by leaving the site polluted than by cleaning it up. Protections for recognized genuinely sensitive resources are important, but it's also important that these carve-outs from cleanup are limited and precise. In practice, Boeing is exaggerating the supposed impacts from doing its cleanup and using this as a loophole to abandon its polluted soil. Boeing's CMS requests exemptions for more than half of the polluted soil it would otherwise remove. DTSC approves about 40% of these, thus allowing Boeing to leave behind a huge additional amount of the polluted soil Boeing should be removing. As laid out in the Boeing settlement agreement, the no cleanup biological exemption areas were generally approved by DTSC, even when contamination at those areas was up to 100 times higher than Boeing's already hugely weakened new cleanup levels. It's not at all clear how leaving such dangerously high levels of toxins in the environment does anything to protect sensitive species. No analysis supposedly supporting the need for such extensive biological exemptions has been made public. NASA and DOE had actual fish and wildlife consultations done, which concluded there are no risks to sensitive species, with the possible exception of Broughton's milk vetch, but that species doesn't grow in Boeing's area, and a 2018 study from Land IQ showed that Broughton's milk vetch does particularly well in disturbed soils, takes well to reseeding from a seed bank, not a good excuse to not do cleanup. The cultural exemptions exhibit a similar pattern, a noble intent that Boeing and DTSC cynically exploit and exaggerate in order to provide cover for the abandonment of immense amounts of contamination.
Thank you, Hakan, for your additional comment. And we do have additional raised hands. Bill, who do we have next, please?
Yes, we have Ruth Lavanos and then Melissa Bumstead. Ruth?
Hi, I just wanted to mention that as a city council member, I am a former city council member, I am privy to the agreements that are made by the residential, and you kept mentioning residential, garden standard, that people are going to live there. But I want to ask you something. Did you know that those who live in the Ranco Canyon developments, those who got land from AJU and the Brandeis University, they all had to sign waivers. And in their mortgage agreements, it states that they are never allowed to plant anything in their backyard, that Boeing, DTSC, Rocketdyne are not liable for any of the diseases or harm that will come about from being on the land, from planting anything on the land. People cannot have pools in Runkle Canyon. Why is that? Why would KB Homes not allow people to have pools or have gardens or grow plants or have fruit trees in their backyard unless the land was contaminated? That's the only reason. And those are covenants in perpetuity because they know, because you acknowledged, because Boeing, Rocketdyne, Department of Energy all acknowledged and know that it is contaminated land. Not with just radiation, but all the pollutants from all of the toxic chemicals that were used in the rockets. That's why those agreements are in there. And you can go to any of the agreements for the land use, for AJU, for Brandeis, that's in the record. And that's something that you cannot mess with. You cannot fix that. You cannot change that. You cannot modify that because it's in there. They can't plant anything. They can't have pools. Why? Because it's contaminated. And you know it's contaminated too. So stop playing games, do your job, and clean it up.
Thank you, Ruth. Melissa, go ahead and unmute yourself and please provide your comment.
Thank you for allowing me this second opportunity. I would also like to speak more to the biological and cultural exemptions. Part of the reason that the original cleanup agreements were altered was quote unquote due to DTSC's best science in the 2022 settlement agreement putting forth new calculations. Pardon me, I'm very tired. The point I'd like to point out is that I was shocked to not find any biological remediation options, as that is best science. There are a lot of studies being done that show less invasive cleanup methods per biological remediation, but also for just smarter detection. You've seen the Committee to Bridge the Gaps transportation study that suggested covered conveyor belts instead of using trucks to remove contamination. These are just some of the smarter, safer cleanup methods that are possible today. And we don't see those in the CMS with Boeing, and it is disappointing to say the least. And that's just in addition to the contamination itself not being cleaned up to the most comprehensive standard. Boeing is one of the foremost technological companies in the world. They're completely capable of using best technology, best science, best methods and practices. That's something we've brought up to the DTSC as well, that we want the gold standards. We would not go to a subpar dentist if we needed a root canal. We want to go to the best. There's no reason that DTSC is using subpar methods for our cleanup, especially when people are being harmed, and we deserve better. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa, for your comment. Bill, who do we have next, please?
We have Christina Walsh.
Christina, please unmute yourself. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, we've waited for so many decades. I can't believe how much time the community has spent trying to achieve cleanup. And based on the data provided by DTSC, these agreements were made. I'm looking at an example that just came out a few months ago that was a violation on mercury on the Boeing portion of the site, and it was from 2003. So the community continues to be put at risk because we don't even know that this has happened until 2 years later. So I guess I just wanted to further reiterate, as has been said by everybody here in their eloquent ways, when is it going to be taken seriously that public health surrounding the site has suffered for decades, and pretending or using sacred sites where the roads and the cement caps are not sacred, and yet somehow they appear to be in this footprint. So it isn't being taken seriously, it's being used as yet another excuse, and we just are waiting for the excuses to stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina, for your comment. Do we have anyone else that would like to make a public comment?
I like to, and I've been on, and my hand been raised a long time.
Okay, Dory, go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. This site needs to be completely cleaned up, period. And no more waiting. What I was listening to tonight, it sounded like when DTSC was saying about the wells, the 57 wells, but we're only going to clean 2, but they're not going to clean it really well. It's just like a little tiny little token type of cleanup. Well, this is what this reminds me of. And it seems like why the oak tree area can't be cleaned up, or where all those rocks were, why it can't, when there's contamination. And as everybody says, it goes downhill. And I like to remind you that Boeing has, in their waste discharge, has there's been over many thousands of where they've been in violation. So as everyone says, it's our public health that's important. Do not risk another child, another animal, another human being, wildlife, whatever. It's time for a complete cleanup to background. And it has to be rural residential, like how the old one was, not your term, but where it's completely cleaned up and people could have gardens. Thank you.
You're on mute, Jamie.
Thanks, Dan. Does anyone have any additional public comments that they would like to make? We have 9 minutes left. If anyone would like to make a public comment, please raise your hand, or we're going to go ahead and close out this meeting. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised, so I'm going to go ahead and move forward. Thank you all for your public comments this evening. To review the documents in more detail, please visit the DTSC webpage for the Boeing SMOU, CMS, and Statement of Basis. There you will find background information, timelines, links to the SSFL document library, and the EnviroStore database, as well as how to access the online public comment portal, Smart Comment. Printed copies are available at the repositories listed on the screen and by appointment at our Chatsworth office. If you have technical or document-specific questions, please submit them through our SSFL stream tool at stream.ssfl.dtsc.ca.gov. DTSC will respond in writing. These responses are intended to help clarify details so you can submit informed public comments. Please note that questions submitted via the stream tool will not be part of the public comment record. Public comments can be submitted now through midnight on October 30th. For efficiency, we highly recommend using the online form Smart Comment. That is accessible via the short link or the QR code on your screen, which allows you to upload attachments or supporting documents. You may also elect to send us comments via email at DTSC_SSFL public comments at dtsc.ca.gov, or mail to DTSC attention Julie Lincoln, SSFL, Boeing Soil CMS and Statement of Basis public comment to 8800 Cal Center Drive, Sacramento, California, 95826. DTSC will review all timely comments and publish a response to comments document along with the final remedy. Any revisions to the CMS and/or Statement of Basis will be reflected in that document, and a work notice will be shared before cleanup begins. Thank you again for attending tonight's meeting and for your continued interest in the SSFL cleanup. Your feedback plays a vital role in shaping a remedy that protects both public health and the environment. If you need assistance accessing documents, submitting comments, or have any accessibility needs, please reach out. Bill has posted the links in the chat. I'll keep the chat open for just a moment if you need to take those out. So thank everyone and good night.